Welcome to the Recover You podcast with Kylene and Patrick. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Patrick, you know what I like?
What do you like?
I really like singing in the shower. But you know, the problem with that is when you get soap in your mouth and then it becomes a soap opera.
Ah!
That was a pretty good one, yeah.
You're on a roll.
Especially since I sing opera.
Yep, that was pretty good.
I feel like that
I actually
good.
thought you were just telling me a story. I was like, you sing in the shower? I've never heard you sing in the shower.
Really?
Yeah, I've never heard you. I know I sing in the shower.
You have heard me sing in the shower.
I don't know. Yes, that's true. I have. Yeah.
Every once in a while.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time it's because you have already left for work, right? And I don't actually sing in the shower that often anyway. Yeah. So there you go. Okay. Too many details. All right. So today we are talking about the idea of spiritual bypassing. So we're going to talk about what that is and how that shows up. And in this conversation, it may be a little overlapped with spiritual abuse. And so we want to be really conscientious about how we talk about this because when I think of spiritual bypassing, I tend to get a little upset because I do feel like a lot of times it is used in what is the word I'm looking at? Concordance? Together with. What's the word? Together with.
In accordance with?
In accordance with? No.
I don't know.
Okay.
Together.
I'm just going to say together with. There's a fancy word for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm falling into the pattern. You said I have issues with words when we record the podcast. Yeah. I'm just following that train of thought. Okay. Anyway, so I get really irritated sometimes thinking about spiritual bypassing because, first of all, I think it's a cop-out a lot of times, but also because I think a lot of times it is used in accordance with, simultaneously with spiritual abuse in order to manipulate and control people. And it's used a lot as an excuse. But the reason I say I want to be careful about talking about this is because I do believe that it is also used by people in a very sincere manner when they are, truly seeking to be a quote unquote good Christian and seek God and, give him control of their lives and things like that. So I want to sort of balance this conversation because I really do feel like there is a spectrum and it does fall on both sides. I do not think, regardless of the intention you come at it with, that it really makes a difference. I think it is not helpful at all. So that's kind of what we're talking about today.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's start with what is spiritual bypassing. So spiritual bypassing is the idea that you use your spirituality or your faith or spiritual terms or what, we often call Christianese language, right? To essentially bypass something. And in this context, it's typically bypassing the difficult work that it takes to actually heal and to recover. And so a lot of times the way this looks is here's an example of how it might happen with like a person that has done the betraying and is recovering from addiction. They start to get into sobriety. And part of that process is recognizing that without the addiction, you start to feel emotions, right? Mm-hmm. That's scary for anybody to go from totally numbed out or having some sort of coping mechanism that works incredibly effectively to I now have anxiety or depression and I don't know what to do with this, right? And so a lot of times mentally, psychologically, there becomes this default of like, well, I don't feel safe feeling this. And all of this is on like a subconscious level, right? Like nobody is actually consciously going to have this conversation with someone and say, no, I just didn't want to do the work, right? Mm-hmm. On a subconscious protection level though, it goes, this is really scary. The idea of facing and feeling emotions that I've never felt completely is so terrifying to me that I want to find another way to cope with it. And so then spiritual bypassing becomes a coping mechanism where, well, if I just say that God's in control or I put the pressure on, all I have to do is pray, number one, I look like a really good person. I look very spiritual. And I feel like I'm doing the right thing because I'm putting all the pressure on God. And two, all of the responsibility for me to do any work whatsoever is gone, which means I don't have to sit in the emotions anymore. I don't have to go to therapy. I don't have to go to group. I don't have to think about this. I don't actually have to face any of my trauma. I don't have to deal with any of the tough emotions and fears and insecurities. Therefore, that sounds like a much better idea to me to say, well, I'm praying, that's all I need to do, than it does to say, I'm actually going to sit in a therapist's office or a coach or practitioner, whatever route you go, and really pull apart my beliefs about why I am an unworthy human being and why I feel that way and where that came from being abandoned in my childhood or, being bullied in middle school or whatever.
So I think there's a lot of things that play into this notion of spiritual bypass. And some of it from a secular society, you can think about how we've been able to do hard things through the advent of science and technology and get them resolved quickly. So for example, you can hop on an airplane in New York and fly to LA in 3.5, 4 hours, right? What used to take hours to go by train or by car, right? So there's that. You have a headache, you take a pill, the headache goes away. You get your gallbladder out, it's 20-minute surgery, and then you're okay. And so I think there's a lot of things that and you see this in people when they really want to go through hard change, and if just taking it away from like losing weight and getting in shape, those are long processes. Mm-hmm. Those aren't 3-week processes or 2-week processes. If you just cannot get, like if you go too fast in a fitness regime, what happens? You get hurt. If you engage in a crash diet, generally it's not effective. It doesn't last long. Or you can induce some sort of medical harm to you if you do something like that, right? So anything that takes time, I think there are facets of our general society, non-religious, that has created this mindset that things can just happen quickly. And spiritual bypass feeds into that. I think the second notion or the second contributor to that is because of the church's unwillingness or inability to address this problem, they have created the sense that you should be able to fix it. So, and there's a lot of examples. So like here's a good example, and whether it's well-intentioned or not, I'm not going to draw on that. I'm just going to talk about the impact of it. So if a man is told, well, just stop it and pray, and then you'll be okay, by his pastor, he views the pastor as the authority figure and says, well, I should be able to do that, and then feels further shame when they can't. Well,
and then it also plays into if you talk about church roles and faith, you're also getting into the hierarchical, male over female.
Right. I was going to say, like, another part of that is if the church leadership tells the wife, "Well, have more sex with him," and they're not trying to be evil to each other, right? Let's say they're just trying to heal. That creates this, well, it's just a simple fix.
Yeah, but what I was
not
thinking,
really a simple fix.
No, not at all. And that's not simple either. That's really abusive.
Yeah, it's abusive.
But thinking about if you go to your pastor as the man and he says, well, you should just pray it away. Well, you might get like this bump of confidence, right? Well, okay, he said I can just pray it away, so I can just do that, right? But then when you have these hierarchical systems in marriage and they really, really believe that they are in charge and they're the leader of the house, even in the midst of sin, which blows my mind. Like to me, even if you believe in complementarianism, the moment you're involved in something like addiction and betrayal, like that just blows up. It just is destroyed completely.
Sure.
So even if you believe in that, which we don't, but if you did believe in the hierarchical system there, this plays into it in such a damaging way that he is then empowered to then power over his wife and say, well, I'm praying about it.
Yeah.
I don't need to do anything. And you need to be the submissive wife who still has sex with me, even though I've betrayed you. I'm showing no signs of healing or recovery.
Right.
And yet I am in control of this relationship. I'm justified in doing so. Mm-hmm. And spiritually, you have nothing to say to me to actually get help. You can't impact me in that way. I think that is one of the most damaging things that can happen.
Well, I mean, there's so many messages from the church that have reinforced this notion of spiritual bypass. I mean, think about what the example of what has happened, and this doesn't happen in every church, but what has happened to clergy or whomever who get caught.
Yeah.
And in the most harmful of ways, they throw them off. They say you can no longer work here, you are no longer allowed to be here or anything like that. So they kick them out. So then not only does that person not get the support they need, the wife doesn't get the support they need. Nobody, maybe the victims, if they were victims of something, they don't get the support they need. Nobody gets the support they need. And what that indicates to people is that, hey, you should have just been able to stop it. And unfortunately,
right, yeah, it's a choice, which again, we do believe it is.
Yeah,
as an adult, there are choices that are made, and when it's an addiction, you always start with a choice. Choices involve the entire time to not ask for help and all those sorts of things.
Right.
And we've talked about this a lot, that once the addiction starts rolling, it's like that, snowball accumulation of brain chemicals and all this kind of stuff.
And you cannot get help on your own. You just
you have to have a team. Yeah.
Right. So
and people and support and community.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is the place where people go for spiritual support can in a lot of cases be the place that really reinforces the notion of spiritual bypass, which further perpetuates in how they react to it and what people observe around them.
Oh, yeah.
The fledgling addict, or the point where people are allowed could, if in a healthy situation, get a lot of help that would prevent some future harm.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't exist.
Unfortunately, the church has been a huge catalyst in a lot of these areas because of the way they respond, and they make situations much worse, as opposed to people who are coming to them, trusting them giving them the support that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's you had mentioned we were talking about the support and community aspect of it, and you think the church, by saying go pray it away or go have more sex with your husband or whatever, or one of the most common is forcing women into forgiveness before they're ready, which is ridiculous. That should be a whole episode that we talk about forgiveness, because they're basically told you have to forgive before there's any evidence of change whatsoever. Right. But the idea of they go to get this support and church saying these things to them actually then keeps them in isolation and working on it by themselves. Because if I'm praying, that's just something that I do by myself in my head, which is like the worst place for an addict to be. And so then you are alone. Yeah. You don't have the community. You don't have the support. You're not talking to anybody.
Well, one of the roots of addiction, or the roots of shame, is denial. Yeah. So how can you spiritually bypass? How do you even know? How do you even know that you are in, that you are moving into healing?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you stop the behavior, but this is a relational issue. This is how do you know that you're improving in your ability to maintain positive relationships?
Yeah, because so many times when this happens, like the women that are in relationships like this will say, hey, my husband is saying, he's resisting therapy, he's resisting group, he's resisting like acknowledging that he has a problem, because he says, well, I prayed it away, I should just have this, whatever. And then they're sitting here on the other side going, but you're not demonstrating actual healing. Like, you're not demonstrating love to me in a way that a man in recovery or a husband that truly is reflecting what the Bible says about marriage is treating me that way. You're not treating me that way. You're treating me as somebody that's angry, that has, these woundings, that is isolated, that is, resentful, that is controlling, that is manipulative, right? So all of those, lack of empathy in general, is what? It is a sign of not healing. And so when they are using this spirituality as I'm recovered, God has healed me, and you're acting like that, I'm sorry, no, he hasn't.
Yeah.
You may have stopped the behavior, but that is not recovery.
Right.
And to think that you can just treat people poorly and say, well, I'm not actively looking at pornography, so therefore I'm a good husband, is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it's a community issue, and you have to heal through the use of community. And so, I think they always say, I just said it. You get hurt in community, you get healed in community, and so you can't bypass it away. I think a lot of folks, are like, well, it happened to Paul, and I think what we miss on Paul is
what happened to Paul?
Saul and Paul. So basically, God showed up, he blinded him.
Oh, the conversion, like the miracle that they're waiting for.
Yeah. I think everybody, I always feel like, hey, you're not Paul. You know what I mean? Like you're really not Paul. But I think
that's kind of where I wanted to mention at the beginning. Is like, listen, it's not that we don't believe in miracles. It's not that we don't believe God is capable of these things. It's not that we don't believe he can do these things, or even that sometimes he does do these things. Mm-hmm. But it's not the majority.
Right.
And so you don't hang your hat on this. You do the work.
Yeah. Well, I also think too, look at if you look at some of the stuff that Paul writes, and I'm reading most of the New Testament right now as I'm reading through it, as I'm spiritual bypassing my life. I'm reading the New Testament right now.
We do this all the time.
Yeah. So, but there's you can see in his writing a process. Mm-hmm. It's, you know what I mean? Like as he had his experiences.
He had all sorts of suffering in his life that he had to face and feel. And
he had the physical suffering, getting thrown in jail and all of these different things. But, he had a falling out with Barnabas. Is that right? Barnabas? I probably should have known that.
No, you're right.
Is that right? Okay.
Like 99% sure that's correct.
Yeah. I was like, is it Silas? Is it
Barnabas? No, it's Barnabas.
Sorry to the theologians out there. But he went through a lot of relational change. Now, I think
it's a good example.
It's just I just really feel like
he had hard conversations.
He had very hard conversations, and
he was not one to say, "Oh, I'll go pray about it." Not that he didn't. He was in constant communication with God, of course.
And if you think about what a lot of his letters were, how to get along with each other, how to interact with each other,
demonstrate love, demonstrate compassion, create
absolutely.
Community.
He wasn't like, hey, go pray it away.
Share the difficult stuff with each other.
Yeah. So I really think that people, with that whole, just stop it thing, it's very much like, well, everybody can be like Saul, Paul, and that's a very, I
think that's a great example.
Yeah.
I also think Jesus is an example because, like, who are we supposed to emulate, right? We're supposed to emulate him as much as we can, right? As he came in a human body and experienced all the human things that we did. But you never see him doing this. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's examples where he does not do that. And to me, what comes to mind is him 40 days in the wilderness being tempted by Satan. Like, he was God. Like, yeah, he was a human, but he was God. What could he have done? He could have said, I'm ending this on day one, first of all. He could have also said, I will just pray. Like Satan even brought that up, right? Like, you could just pray and have the angels here, or like God could just take care of this, right? Or he could just not do anything and just sit there and ignore him and pray in his head, right? But what did he actually do? He went through the process of experiencing the emotions and the temptations and the experience of being through this for 40 days without food, and suffering physically and probably mentally as a human being. Mm-hmm. And then he took He took the tools and resources that he had, fought back against it, and ultimately won. And that's not separate from God. Obviously he was God and I'm sure, connected to God, and God was supporting him. But it wasn't just not taking any action and letting some other deity do something for him. He demonstrated as a deity who could do all of those things for himself, what it looks like to use the tools and resources and take action and go through the difficult, painful process.
Right. Well, if you think, I often think about this, from Jesus' life. It was the night he was seized. He went with the couple of disciples and he asked them, he begged them to stay awake. Then he went and prayed, and they came back and they were asleep. And that happened twice, right? Mm-hmm. Or 3 times or whatever. And he didn't do that because he did that because he desired community. He desired people to be there waiting for him. He was very vulnerable in that moment, and he was sad when he came back and saw they were asleep, because he needed them. He recognized that in that moment of extreme pain, realizing what he was going to go into, is he needed those human beings who he was very close with to be there with him. Yeah. And they let him down, they let him down.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because we've talked about this with The Chosen and how it personifies the human side of Jesus and the fatigue that he would feel and the emotional stress that he would feel. And I think so often when we read the Bible, we just think of him so much as the God side, right? That we go, oh, well, that part ruled more of his body than the human part. And so therefore, maybe he didn't really suffer like we did. Maybe he didn't really feel all the emotions that we did and go through all of the pain. No, he did.
I mean, he cried blood.
Yeah, he was so stressed out that his tears turned into blood, like he was sweating blood or whatever it was. Yeah. And I mean, that's a real medical condition that's been documented. Like that's tremendous mental and emotional suffering. Right. And what did he do? He chose to go through that. Right now, we know the purpose of that. But at any time, he could have snapped his fingers. And I think so much of his life and the reason he came was to give us those examples and to show us what it's like to actually be in a human body and still choose to do the hard things, because on the other end is where, or through the process and getting to the other side is where the growth happens. Yeah. And I think that's what's so sad about this. And again, I want to balance this with compassion and with love too, because, you know, there are situations where a lot of guys are out there just using this to get what they want, to manipulate their wives. And, you know, that's not cool. It's not kind, you know? And there's a lot of people that sincerely, and you were one of those people, sincerely, truly believe that, well, if I just pray harder, like this will go away, right? And so we do want to balance this with love for those people, because sometimes I think it's just a flat out mischaracterization and misunderstanding of scripture and misunderstanding of how God works in the world. Like we said, yes, it is possible for him to tap you on the shoulder and take the temptations away, or illness, or to heal you. And I believe all of that is absolutely possible, but I just also believe that 99% of the time, the way he works in order to help us, it's not that he's not involved in the process, but in order to help us actually achieve growth and to move forward in our purpose, in our humanness, is actually have us to go through things where we take action. And we, you know, it's like the idea of, like hiring a coach, right? Like, or any sort of financial transaction that you do for help, whether it's like hiring a doctor or paying for something that you find value in, right? And there's something to that transaction where there's a little bit of skin in the game, and it makes it worth it to you, and you get a lot more out of it, and it means more to you because there was effort put in. And I think that's one of the reasons that spiritual bypassing is so dangerous, because you are attempting to skip all of the work and avoid all the tools and the resources that God has literally put in front of you so that you can learn the things that you need to learn, expand your level of compassion and empathy and love in the world, and step into the person he really wants you to be. It's not when I say, like, don't just pray about it and actually do the work, I'm not saying don't involve God. I think he's involved in every step of the process. I just think he uses some of these hard things to help us actually become who he wants us to be. And I think when we avoid that, it is a huge cop out, and we end up not being the best versions of ourselves. And I know why we want to do this, because this process is hard. And you and I have, over the past couple of years, faced some of the hardest emotions, and things still come up, right? Like, I was in a 3-hour processing session with one of my coaches this week, and it was really deep, dark fears and insecurities and mental gremlins that I was facing and scared for years and years and years to even bring up and tell somebody that I struggled with, and finding that safe place and working through it. And that's absolutely huge. But I know that this is worth it, because when I was back in high school, before I really had any hard things in my life and started moving through them and experiencing this type of stuff, I was so black and white. I was so black and white. Yeah, I was like, this is right. Empathy. Yeah, this is right. This is wrong. I have no compassion for people, you know, all this kind of stuff. Like, that's how my brain worked. And then I started experiencing life a little bit. Yeah. And one of the biggest things that was like a huge earth-shattering like shift in my mentality was my divorce. And that I always looked back on as a huge catalyst for empathy in my life, because of the way people treated me through it, the Christian community, and how I was ostracized and all this kind of stuff and treated very poorly. And then I really, that experience in and of itself opened up my heart to see other people's life situations and go, wow, I probably don't know everything that's going on in their lives. I probably don't understand everything that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going through something really hard. And it was like from that moment in my life, basically was, really making an effort to stop judging situations and judging people, because I just didn't, I knew what it felt like at that point.
Yeah.
And that made a huge shift. And so I've noticed, the more things that we go through like this, it's like the empathy and the love and the compassion for others really expands. And so I really feel like spiritual bypassing it's so ironic, because you think, oh, I'm doing the right thing because I'm putting all the pressure on God and putting all the responsibility on God. Isn't he supposed to be in control?
Mm-hmm.
And yet you are removing the possibility of growth from your life by doing that so many times. Are you looking for a support group for betrayal recovery? Many women who reach out to me are seeking a place where they can feel seen and heard while connecting with other women going through similar experiences. I am so excited to tell you that I am working on creating a support group to provide a safe community, as well as all the tools and resources you need to spur your own growth moving forward. I have noticed that Facebook is a little clunky. It doesn't make connecting with others in the group easy, and often, even if it's a private group, it feels a little too public. While there are support groups that exist, some of them are only peer-to-peer with no group education or support moving everyone forward in their healing. This can lead to groups where everyone is more stuck in a victim mentality instead of a growth mentality. There may be other groups that are just course-led, allowing you to go through an online course, but leaving you without a community when you're done. So what I've been hearing from all of you is that you are looking for both the growth and the community aspect in a private and safe community that is easy to use and fits within your budget. So what if we could create something brand new, something that isn't on Facebook, but it is private and uses its own app? Something that is community focused, allowing you to connect both in a large group and personalized small groups of 5 to 6 women that you can develop deep relationships with. What if it offered live classes that you could either join in to engage with in question and answer, or you could just stick in the app and stream it live privately? What if it offered all the communities and lives in one place, so you weren't finding yourself jumping back and forth between Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Zoom, or all of the different apps? It could offer different levels of support and access based on your needs and budgets. And in addition to group and small group communities, it could also include practitioner guidance, classes, and tasks for integrating and moving your healing forward. If all of this was offered for $25 a month, would you be interested? If so, please take just a few moments to provide some feedback at the link in the show notes. I am really excited about creating this new community and would love to hear your thoughts.
Yes. No, that was really that was really.
I just went on a long rant. I'm gonna take a couple sips here.
Well done.
It's your turn.
Okay.
You say something now.
Insert elevator music.
See, it's not scripted. Patrick didn't know what to say. It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah. No. It's really they're as you are right. How people don't want to feel these emotions that lead to healing. But they are the things that shape you as a person who, I think most young people will hold an idealism to them, and that, that's good because it kind of shapes their careers and things like that. But, there's a lot of real hurt out there. And I think with the process that I've been through, I was actually talking to somebody yesterday at work about somebody else. And I said, do you know why they act that way? And they were like, no, I don't understand why this person's kind of blunt and things like that. And so I talked through like what could be a fear for that person. Mm-hmm. And the person I was talking to was like, man, I never thought of that. And I honestly believe that I wouldn't have that perspective had I not gone through.
Oh my gosh, I know for a fact, watching you go through addiction recovery and learning all these processes and tools has shifted the way you think about people. You've always been a really good boss, but I've heard some of the conversations that you have and the way that your perspective has shifted, because now you view it through the lens of emotional wounding and trauma and emotional experiences. And that alone gives you a deeper understanding and compassion for people's behavior and responses and thought processes and life experiences. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that has had an impact for sure. So, we have sort of talked a lot about it from the side of, men using this as an excuse not to get into addiction recovery, right? But women do this too, or betrayed partners do this as well. And again, I think a lot of times it is born out of a sincere heart in saying, I really have to lean on God right now. I really have to trust him that there's a purpose for this in my life, that he loves me, that he's going to take control of this, that there's a reason that I'm going through this horrible, horrible thing right now. And I want to put all of my faith and all of my effort into him because he's the only thing I can trust right now, right? When trust is completely destroyed and blown up in your life, a lot of times God is the only thing you feel like you can put your energy into. And what that often shows up as in a lot of the same ways, same concept, same end result is I'm not going to go to a coach, go to a practitioner, go to a therapist. I'm not going to face the emotions. It may be denial about the depth of the spouse's addiction. It may be I don't want to have all the information, which everyone's a little bit different in the amount of information that they want to know. And I get that. But generally speaking, only having a little bit is probably not enough for you to know the person that you're married to or to give full consent for your body and your marriage moving forward. And so there is a level to which I find it very important to be willing to go through the process of getting the information you need and go through the emotional healing and recovery process. But what's scary about it is you are essentially saying when you choose to do this, more or less, I'm willing to traumatize my brain for a period of time in order to get the information I need to move forward. And I think a lot of women, rightly so, are afraid of that. And I have a very, I would say, sensitive brain. My brain views things in pictures. So if I read something that's scary or traumatic, I see it in my mind and it's very traumatizing for me. And this whole process of learning about the addiction brought so many images to mind and so many thoughts, and it pulled up other traumas for me and other past. And it really has caused a trauma debris storm of images in my mind that's really horrible. I don't like that. I didn't want that. And I wouldn't go back and not learn what I know now because I know who you are. I understand more about addiction. I understand more about the world. And I have absolutely invested the time in the tools and resources to support my body and my brain through that. Right. So it happens on both sides. Right. And the typical way that it shows up is I believe that God is going to handle this. I'm waiting for a miracle in my life. All I need to do is pray harder, be more faithful, be the submissive wife, toe the line, do the right thing, quote unquote. And God's going to reward me in the end. And sometimes that's not the way it works.
I heard this. It's actually Ted Roberts talks about this. There's or maybe it's Doug Weiss, mentions that part of the time when you've got a wound is when you can't tell your story. So here would be a good example. On the wife's side, hey, what's going on in your family? Oh, everything's fine. We're just working through a couple things. Versus, I just found out that my husband had a 12-year pornography addiction, or he's had 3 affairs that I didn't know about, and I'm really trying to process through that. So
say that line again. That's really.
You really know when you have a wound when you can't tell your full story.
Yeah.
And so think about it on the betrayed side, but also on the betrayer. If you can't tell your story, hey, I was addicted to cyber sex, and I spent a lot of money. And I did inappropriate things. And so, could I have said that on a podcast 4 years ago? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? But that it wasn't because I was a horrible person. So I was deeply wounded.
I think that's such a good way to bring that up, because what we're trying to say is that spiritual bypassing still leaves room for shame. And if whatever you're doing still leaves room for shame or guilt, then it's not actual recovery.
Right.
And here is my belief, and that is that Jesus wants you in full recovery.
He does.
And that means freedom from the act. So you can be in sobriety, you can be praying your brains out. You can be a wife who's really struggling and just saying, God, I'm so sad, but I know you're going to restore this marriage. Well, restoring a marriage takes work, and it takes human work, and it takes 2 people interacting and having these hard conversations. And it really takes doing the emotional healing work to overcome the shame, overcome the embarrassment, I think that is an incredibly powerful point to say that, and you don't have to do it like us. You don't have to have a podcast or put it on a platform of millions of people on social media or anything like that. But we often hear stories about women in particular that say, I don't have a support system because I don't want to throw my husband under the bus and tell anybody that he's done this stuff. And that leaves you so alone and so isolated in your situation. And it doesn't allow you the support or the process to actually heal and be able to share your story without embarrassment. Because what if you could go through this process, like this, and again, not on a podcast per se, but to a friend and say, yeah, my husband had a sex addiction for 10 years. He's been in recovery for, 3, for 2, for 5, for 10, whatever. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you the process that it took to recover and where we are today.
Well, and there's
because they might be going through the same thing.
That's right. There are people out there, and I'm surprised at the network of people that we've come in contact with who need help. Who, you don't need to be a PhD with 10 years of CSAT experience to help somebody going through this process. You need to be somebody who's working on your own process, who could be 3 days in front of the other person mm-hmm. and can help them through it. If I could read this out of, there's a really good book called Safe by Nick Stumbo. He's the executive director of Pure Desire Ministries. And his book is called Safe, Creating a Culture of Grace in a Climate of Shame. And the passage is, believing that change is simple. Another wrong path is to act as if change is simple, only a matter of deciding to change. Maybe we don't say as much, but our actions betray us. We give the person struggling with sin a few verses to read and tell them to pray more, assuming this will fix the problem. Now, prayer is powerful, and the Word of God does change lives, but this counsel isn't a magic cure. If changing our bad behavior was as simple as making a choice to never do it again, no one would struggle with sin. We would simply say to God, others, or ourselves, I will never do that again, and we would be free. How many of us have said that 1,000,000 times about 1,000,000 different faults, and yet we find ourselves back again? Change isn't simple, and this is, I think, this is the key to what we're talking about. Change isn't simple. And when we act like it is, we become a performance-based culture, not a grace-based culture. So and I think you mentioned it, it's like when we spiritual bypass, we don't actually feel the full weight of God's grace for us. We feel like we're just doing things versus really believing.
We're just doing things and we're waiting for him to just do things for us.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's, it's interesting because you think about a marriage relationship and you think about, okay, what is the level of work that it takes to have a really healthy relationship and good communication, right? And I posted something the other day that was basically like, it only takes one person to destroy a marriage, but it takes two to recover a marriage, right? And you think about that in your relationship with God, it's the same thing, right? Like I think so many times, and historically, this is essentially societally almost what we're taught is that God is this, genie that we just put some coins in the slot and get our wish out, right? And we get frustrated if we don't get our wish, right? And he's like, well, I have this process for you to actually learn and develop these character qualities and these characteristics and to learn how to communicate better and to learn how to navigate relationships better and to learn how to interact with your fellow humans better. And, I'm not gonna give you your wish if you're asking me to skip over all of that, because that's, right. I think a lot of times he's going, hey, I am trying to help you. You gotta work with me here. You gotta take the opportunities that I'm actually putting in front of you. And so often, not always, but so often that does look like going to work with a coach, sitting down and doing the trauma work, feeling the emotions, learning how to support your nervous system, like all these practical things. And I think some people want to spiritualize it so much. It's just this magic, like, oh, my whole body is healed. And it's like, no, sometimes there are actual tangible tools that he gives you. These are in the world, used by Christians, provided by Christians to help you. And non-Christians too. I mean, there's a lot of non-Christians.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about spiritual bypass. I wanted to talk a little bit about how the church and some of its stuff creates this spiritual bypass. So this is actually some examples out of a book I'm reading right now called The Healing Church, What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography and How to Fix It by Sam Black. And so it's got some really good things in there. And I'm just going to give two contrasting examples of what the church can do to reinforce spiritual bypass. And then it kind of goes into that spiritual abuse pattern as well. Mm-hmm. So these are examples of experiences that hurt us. After telling my priest about the porn, he said, "You are both broken people and need to deal with it." Mm-hmm. Before I left his office, he gave me suggestions. Go on a date night once a week, have more sex, let him be the leader he needs to be. Mm-hmm. I've never been back.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. So think about that. A man,
that just makes sense.
You know, what happens in a lot of these situations is you don't know. The addicted doesn't know. The betrayed doesn't know. They're searching for answers. They don't know. And so the first person, if you think about it, and God wants the church to be a healing place, they go to the church to get some healing.
Think about that example.
The advice they get.
Think about that example. That happens all the time. I hear comments from women like that all the time. Think about that example. If that husband had come in feeling like, what's wrong with me and I need help, got that advice, and then literally by that advice was just taught, oh, I can actually blame this on my wife. You're right. She doesn't dress sexy enough for me. She doesn't do, you know what I mean? Like if he came in with the heart of like, help me, and then heard that advice, it could very easily be interpreted as, okay, well, that's actually my wife's fault.
Yeah. So here's the other side. When I discovered my husband had been looking at porn for 20 plus years of our marriage, my pastor and his wife acknowledged that long-term porn use was as damaging to our relationship as having an affair. It's exactly what I've been feeling. They supported me and offered to find me help.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, I mean, I can speak into personal example with this. When I got divorced the first time, I've never been divorced since. Just once.
If I don't contribute well in this podcast, it's all on the cards are on the table.
No, when I got divorced, my ex had cheated on me, and my pastor at the time insisted on having a meeting with me and emailed me multiple times. And I said, no, I don't really feel like this is appropriate to talk to you about, right? Like this is my personal life that I was making a decision on, that I was living, right, for the past couple of years with my husband. And kept emailing me and kept emailing, like, no, I'd really like to get together with you. And I was just like, I don't want to. I don't feel like this is appropriate. And I don't really feel like there's any involvement needed here. My dad was on the board at the time, the deacon board or whatever, and was like, well, maybe you should sit down with him and all this kind of stuff. So I took my mom, we sat down, and it just turned into this whole thing of, well, you need to do counseling with people that I want you to have counseling with, and all. He basically talked at me for like an hour. I don't remember talking a lot. I think I said a couple things at the very beginning and throughout that, hey, I have a counselor. He's a Christian counselor. No, like I'm comfortable where I am, kind of defending my position of I can handle myself, and I can make decisions for myself. But what had happened, talking about spiritual bypassing and manipulation, how it all typically plays hand in hand or often does. My ex had been somebody that wasn't really going to church when we got together and started going because I did. And, he kind of molded into that. Maybe he sincerely wanted to, but also I think part of it was like, well, she does, and we're going to be in a relationship. And okay, so then he got into it. And so then he, when all this came out, went to the pastor of the church that I had been at for 17 years. Like I grew up in this church and people knew me and my family, and we were heavily involved. He had been going for a couple of years, talked to the pastor, no idea what he said. But whatever it was that he said laid that foundation, right? So then I go in with the pastor separately, and it's all about what I need to do and what I should do, and nothing about, my ex's responsibility in it really at all. Just that I should try harder for the marriage and give it another shot and go through counseling and all this kind of stuff with people that the pastor wanted me to. Right. And we walked out of that, and my mom, even, I think she was kind of frustrated with me, went back and said, hey, you do know, like she found porn on the computer like 3 months in or something like that. Didn't even face him. Basically acted like that was no big deal. Right.
I wonder why.
Right. Yeah. And being married to me and going through all this process, how big a trauma that was in my life, that church experience and their response to what I was going through. And I remember thinking, because the pastor had a daughter, and I was like, oh my gosh, dude, if your daughter was me right now, your response would be completely different. If she wasn't, and if you had lived in my shoes and been in the relationship that I had been in, your response would be different, right? But instead, essentially what he wanted me to do was spiritually bypass the situation.
Right.
And I mean, to his credit, quote unquote, recommending counseling or whatever, but you don't just take control of the situation, right? You talk to somebody and you say, never do I remember any empathy or compassion
That's what I was going to say.
being expressed to me.
You lead with acknowledging the pain.
Right.
Hey, listen, I understand this is extremely difficult. Could I offer you some advice?
No, it was bold to come
like
shop, let me control the situation and coerce you into behaving the way I want you to behave in this situation, which was totally wrong. Totally wrong. And it caused a lot of church trauma for me for a really, really long time. And I had a lot of
well, and I think what's happened is churches, the book that I just read from the Healing Church, they talk about a couple different sides to it. So certain churches will react very harshly and throw their fire people or kick people out of the church or have them come up and publicly confess and all these different things that have then other churches will be very grace-filled and they'll say, hey, I'm really sorry, or hey, we forgive you and stuff like that. But there won't be any path to healing or anything like that. And so, what we want to do is, from a spiritual health piece is do in the middle. You know what I mean? Like maybe somebody who's in a church leadership position who's been caught. They need to step down. They absolutely need to step down.
But take them through the healing process.
Take them through the healing process, and you put them in
that set up. You offer the community. You offer them the love, and say, "Hey, we don't view you differently. We know you're struggling, and we have this group over here.
Right.
No, we're not going to have you lead youth group, or no, we're not going to have you be the associate pastor right now.
So we understand where you are. That could be a one.
Right. Yeah.
That could be.
And that's the church really getting behind the idea of sobriety versus recovery too, right? And we were talking about earlier when men go, oh, I'm praying and I'm in sobriety. Like, what's your problem, right? They don't understand the idea of actual recovery. Recovery is a loving husband. Recovery is empathy. Recovery is understanding the pain you caused your spouse that you've cheated on. Recovery is actually acknowledging that it is cheating. Like you were reading in that book, that whether it's virtual or real or in person or touching or not touching, doesn't matter. Right. The fallout on the betrayed spouse is the same. And so recovery is understanding and taking responsibility for all of that. It's not saying, well, I haven't masturbated this week. Why aren't you having sex with me?
Yeah. I was thinking about this, so we are involved in two churches and they're both full of wonderful people. And the pastoral staffs at both churches are wonderful and they grow and they mean well and all of these different things. And I think about this, both churches, when you had cancer, they brought food and they prayed and they supported. When this all came out, and we've been public with it, so it hasn't been like been a big secret. The reactions are very different.
Oh my gosh!
The reactions are very, and then, so I don't want to throw people under the bus and all that stuff.
Both churches are awesome.
Yeah, but I think what it does highlight is this notion of, and I think you probably see the same. If somebody comes out that has been a cocaine addict or something like that. People have a hard time knowing how to react to that. It's much easier to sign up for a share a meal service and to, say, hey, we'll come over, we'll clean your house, through illness.
About it is because you have to understand if it's not happening to you, it's happening to your friend sitting next to you in the pew.
That's right. It's that pervasive.
It's that prevalent. And so, I think what happens is people feel triggered by the fact that we are willing to talk about it so publicly. I think there's part of that. I would never feel secure enough to say that. So that, why are they? Right. There's that probably in a few cases.
Right.
And then there's a lot of, well, that's embarrassing. And people said that to me too, of the whole, why are you hanging your husband's dirty laundry out for the public to see? And I'm like, that is so far from the way that we view this. It's dirty laundry if you're regularly cheating on me and I'm calling you out on social media.
Right.
It's different if we are saying, hey, this is a really horrible thing that we both experienced. This is what it means and we're recovering from it. And this is how you too can recover if you or someone is dealing with this. And that was our goal, is let's talk about this. And so the responses from the churches are really different. It's very fascinating to just even like through my divorce and then through this, to just watch, like, see how Christians respond. It's, and Christians in different communities, right? It's, and different pastors. It's very, very interesting to see how some people just love and pour out compassion and empathy and are so incredibly supportive, and how other people will alienate you. And then some people in the middle are just like what you're saying, like, I don't know what to say. So I just don't say anything.
And I think that's okay too. And I think that's where the church and messages can come in to actually tell people what to say, to show people. I mean, it's amazing how when you hear, when and I use this example with flying. The first time somebody showed me how to land a helicopter and pick it up to a hover, I was like, oh wow, okay. Now I can figure that out. So like if somebody says, hey, listen, if you hear about somebody in the church who's been betrayed, one of the don't say, man, I don't know what to say to her. One of the best things you can say is acknowledge the hurt and just say, hey, I'm thinking about you. If there's anything, I mean, that incredibly empathetic moment. I remember when I shared my story with my boss, and it was a very hard thing to do. And I don't know, it was like 5 months in or whatever. His first comment to me was, well, how can I support you?
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
When I actually thought that he would, there would be consequences, So
shame you.
Right. And even you, like as I'm pouring out my broken, disjointed confession on day one, you're hugging me, you know what I mean? So I think people don't, the incredible healing power of just being empathetic and listening and saying, how can I help?
The fear is there for a real reason, right? Like when I talk about my divorce story, like there was ostracizing, there was control, there was manipulation, there were lost relationships, right? And so if you find that when you talk to people, that's their response, just know that that's not everybody. And it is okay for you to leave those groups and leave those communities and to walk away and to find a community of people that will support you.
Yeah, we all deserve to be in community and relationships where we are loved.
And just a reminder that is not you. They are not behaving in a Christ-like manner when that happens. And so it's totally reasonable to find a community that does.
And, I was thinking about this as we were talking. So when we talk about like how wonderful the church is when they come alongside you when you're sick and prayer requests go out and all of these different things, it's beautiful. It's fantastic. Generally, when there is a health issue, people will say there's a health issue. Generally, when there's an addiction issue, they won't state that.
They don't know.
And so I think about this. I'm like, God died on the cross not because of our cancer or our intestinal problems or our broken finger. He died on the cross for our sins. And so he's giving us grace from our sins. He's not giving us grace from our cancer or our broken leg or our torn meniscus. And so what's interesting is God is already residing in those areas where they're hard to talk about. He's in those moments. And for whatever reason, we have bypassed ourselves through Christianese or whatever that is to stay away from those environments where we should talk openly about the hurt that's caused by obsession with spending or overeating or sex addiction or alcoholism, the emotional and physical impacts of those things. That's where God wants to do his work. And sometimes we don't let him because of the spiritual.
The ideal place for healing should be the church.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think this generation, we should lead the world in that. And I think this generation is beginning to shift in that direction and seeing that. And I think that's what deconstructions.
I think deconstruction
part of it
is saying, hey, this church didn't heal. It's not a healing place. So we're gonna push back and we're gonna find a way to make the church a healing place again. And more power to the churches who have gotten in front of that and the clergy that have said, hey, we need to take a lead on that and are willing to step back and say, hey, I made some mistakes and what I mean, that's incredible.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah. I think that's why when Pastor Rick Warren came out and said, hey, one of the biggest regrets I have in 50 years of ministry is the stance I took on women preaching in the church and their right to do so. people are like, oh, it's about time. And I'm like, yeah, it is about time. And I'm not going to bash this guy for coming to the right conclusion. I mean, it took him time. Yeah. But good for him for doing the mental and emotional work to go counterculture to everything that he's believed for 50 years, to do the research and actually make a different decision. We should celebrate that, not shame him for the time it took him. Right.
That's right. So, yeah. We all, it takes time. It takes time to grow. I'm 51. Sometimes I look back on this process and go, man, how much time did I waste? You know what I mean? With this, and it would been great if I could have, gotten perspective in my 30s or my 20s, or you know what I mean? Like, but I think, and this is hard because I never want to be like, hey, this is wonderful. Like, the process had to happen the way the process had to happen.
Yeah, we've talked about that too. Even the timing of discovery in our relationship, like where it happened and when it happened, me being in a place that I could respond the way I responded, and being where we are today, being so worth it in the end. Yeah.
And
so I'll wrap this up with, well, what do you do instead? If you're listening to this and you go, man, I didn't realize I've been doing this, and I've been doing it with the right mindset, right? Of just trusting God more. And I didn't realize that was, a bad thing. And again, trusting God is not a bad thing, but if you're listening to this thing going, oh man, I didn't realize I was spiritually bypassing. What the heck do I do? Here's what I think you do. I think you mix the two together. And so you ask God to be part of the healing process, and you involve him through it. And you ask him for wisdom and guidance and strength, and you ask him for the heart and the mind transformation. But while you're doing that, you as a human get down to work. And what that typically looks like, and we talked about this on the podcast a lot, is you work with other humans, and you get in support groups, and you work on the emotions, and you get into coaching or therapy or whatever. And if you're a betrayed spouse and you need that support, please reach out. Look at the link in the show notes, because I do work with betrayed women one-on-one, and we spend a lot of time processing these really hard emotions and untangling, anger that you're feeling, or untangling anxiety. I just had a call yesterday with a client who she was experiencing a lot of anxiety. And so we were able to do an emotional processing session where we actually spoke to the anxiety. And it was just really cool because she was able to drop down into her body, which I always love when we do these exercises, because part of what happens in betrayal is you lose trust for other human beings, but a lot of times you lose trust for yourself. And a lot of the exercises that we do actually help build that trust with your body again, because so often when they get on a call with me to say, hey, like, is working together the right fit, or they fill out a form or whatever, a lot of times what one of their goals is to learn how to trust themselves again. And some of these exercises kind of intrinsically do that as the end result, because if you're dropping down and you're learning how to name your emotions and how to talk to them and how to respond to them, that's your body. And you're learning how to acknowledge it and validate it and respond to it. And over time, you learn how to trust that more and more and more and more. And that process becomes faster. And you then can identify the feeling, and you know exactly what it's trying to communicate to you, and you know exactly what to do. And sometimes that means setting a boundary. Sometimes that means that you've identified a limiting belief, and then you write that down and you bring it to your coach the next week and you process that limiting belief about yourself. Because if you have identified through that process that you actually believe that no matter what you do, you're going to live a life a certain way because you're unlovable, well, that's going to hinder you from the life that you consciously say that you want, right? Which is to be in community and love and relationship and you know, that sort of thing. So this is the type of stuff that we do in our sessions together, one-to-one, and it does take time and it does take a process, but it is so worth it in the end.
And I think, you know, as you're sitting there talking, I'm thinking about, in the context of everything you're talking about, how you're helping this person, and from the context of trying to avoid spiritual bypass, everything you talked about that you do with your clients is something that other people have shown you how to do. And they were shown by other people, taking them through their own healing process. And one of the things that Dr. Ted Roberts talks about is, you know, or he recommends his prayers. You know, you pray to God and you say, show me how I can change. And he uses human beings in other situations to show you that. Yeah. So I think it, you know, I just thought that was interesting as you were talking through your process. You didn't just
I just wake up one day. Yeah.
Poop into your head.
Yeah. And actually, that's such a good point, because the way I work in particular, specifically, like I use so many different modalities. There's so many ideas from so many humans over the course of so much time that I actually mix together and mush together and make it so independent for every single client that like every call is different, because every person is different. Right. And here's where I think God is involved. He's made our nervous systems to behave this way. He's made our nervous systems need to feel safety. He's created our brains. He understands the difference between the conscious and the subconscious. These are just tools and modalities to work within what he has created. So I feel like there's no separation between depending on God to help heal you and actually investing in your own healing with another human being. Like I think those go part and parcel, because that's how you often accomplish that end goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, we hope that this was helpful. I hope we balanced it effectively. I think we did. We talked about the church. We talked about the abuse. We talked about the sincere heart. So if any of you are resonating with this, we hope that it was helpful to you. And if you need support, just look at the links in the show notes, and we'd be more than happy to point you in a direction of healing and next steps. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast interesting or helpful, it would mean so much if you leave a 5-star review or post a screenshot and share on social media. We are on a mission to share the message of recovery, and you can help get the word out. If you know a friend who could use this podcast, please share it.